So we're in Metairie Cemetery, Gary's last day here in New Orleans. Of course, the man himself, tomb of Carlos Marcello and his wife Jackie. Originally, Carlos was not interred here. In fact, one of the things I forgot to take you by yesterday was the West Lawn Cemetery in Gretna, where he was originally entombed in the Marcello family tomb. His mom and dad are buried there along with his brother Vincent. But we'll get on that one next time. But so this is Carlos's tomb. His brother Sammy is buried in here also, along with, I want to say Pete, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look again. So.
You remember the significance of the coins? I read that one.
Yeah,
I can't remember now.
There's two things. There's one's for the military, and then another one is for non-military. And I can't remember exactly what was what, but something like for the military side, it was like if you put a penny on the tomb, means you went to basic training with them. A nickel is you were stationed with them. A quarter was something like you were in combat with them.
Quarter, you're a made man.
Yeah.
Penny,
you're
kind of a far out associate. Yeah. A dime, you're closer. You're an earner,
Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely not military for Carlos, because he was never in the military. So
they're on John Denninger's tomb or headstone. There's all kinds of coins, and I read that.
Oh, really?
And I can't remember what the heck it meant.
But Denninger, he was in the military.
Yeah, but this was some other kind of thing, I think. It might be. I can't remember. But, another kind of an interesting little story is this place, everybody's buried above ground.
There, you will find a few in the ground burials. Now, like this one over here, this is called a coping. They're actually buried in the ground, but it's built up.
Okay, all right, I see. Interesting. What I started to say was that bottle of booze on there. I got this guy I went to high school with who was a wild and crazy guy, died of, like basically old age, hard life drinking, and he was, younger than me. He died several years ago. So every time you drive by the cemetery up home, there's a bottle of whiskey at his grave. Anybody wants a drink, they say, can stop by and get a drink on Eddie.
Have a drink with them.
So there's somebody like you want to have a drink with Carlos. I guess you just pop a top on that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Carlos's brother Sammy, Salvador Martello. He was Carlos was born in 1910, so Sammy was younger by 18 years. I mean, I guess their mom and dad they made some babies. But so it's thought, everybody kind of thinks, since they were his brothers, they were all made. But I got pretty good info that only two of his brothers were made. Joe, who was the underboss to Carlos, and his brother Vincent. Now, all the brothers were involved in certain things, gambling, jukeboxes or slot machines, that type of stuff. Sammy had some restaurants, I believe, along with Joe, but the rest of them weren't made. Sammy wasn't a made guy, but they all had some sort of thing going on with Carlos's blessing. So okay, what we have here is the tomb of the Lococo Brothers. They were cousins to the Giaconas. In 1916, Castranzio and Vincent Lococo were walking in front of the Monteleone Hotel in the Quarter, along with Pietro Giacona and Corrado Giacona, and when they were shot at. Everybody was wounded except Corrado. Now, we didn't get to cover any of the Giacona stuff in the Quarter. That'll be next time. But Corrado Giacona is thought to be an early boss in New Orleans. He's thought there's a couple different versions of what happened after Matrangas had retired. one of the versions is Giacona took over with Sam Carollo as a street boss. But there was a couple of attempts on the Giaconas. A famous one was earlier, about 8 years earlier. But so yeah, that's the Lococo Brothers were both wounded in that, and along with Pietro. Now the Giaconas and the they were wine merchants, and the Lococos they were fruit merchants. I guess they were big into importing lemons and oranges, from what I understand. Okay. This one here, this is where Diamond Jim Moran's buried. Him and his wife. It's the Latino tomb. His wife married Latino. She was a Latino, so that's why he's here. This type of marble, I really hate it because it's very hard to capture the stuff on film or in pictures. But if you want to get up closer, you can see James Moran Bricado over there, which Bricado was his real name. Moran was a fake name. As the story goes, he didn't want his mom to know he's boxing, so he used the name Moran so his mother wouldn't find out. So,
and you guys might remember Bobby Brocado was on the show here, I don't know, a couple years ago. He wrote a book about Diamond Jim. I talked to him while I was down there. We just couldn't get together. I told him we were coming over here, so he gave me directions. I knew you knew, so.
Yeah, that there's a lot of good stuff in that book.
Yeah.
I got a copy of it. He's got it. Anybody that's interested in getting that book, he's got a copy that's black and white and a copy that's color. I'd get the colored copy if I was you.
Okay.
So.
That's Bobby Brocado about Diamond Jim Moran.
Yep. So, this is a tomb of mob royalty. I guess you could say mob royalty for the whole country, really, but certainly for New Orleans. This is the Matranga tomb. Now, Charlie Matranga's name is not on here anywhere. However, I've confirmed with the cemetery that he is interred here. I don't have an explanation for why. The only thing I can think of is, they didn't want a bunch of sightseers coming to the tomb or whatever, souvenir takers, stuff like that. However, we have Salvatore Matranga, who was his dad, who really got things rolling as far as the Stavageri here in New Orleans. We also have Anthony Matranga, who we had talked about, lost his leg in the Claiborne Esplanade ambush between the Provenzanos and the stevedores for the Matrangas. And we have Joseph Matranga, who was killed in 1916. Now, I've got a news clipping saying he was killed in basically what amounted to workplace violence. A guy that had been fired from the company came in and killed him. I don't know if that was a cover or what. I can't find any details. But there at that time in the 19 teens, there was a lot of violence back and forth between the factions in New Orleans. So I tend to think it was probably some violence between the factions. But it's a beautiful tomb. You'll see, you'll find a few more like this, because it was basically like any other company. Here's our models, choose which one you like, and it's not a custom made tomb or anything. But then you got this little mosaic thing here, which is in bad shape. We're at the tomb of Louis Prima. Of course, I never heard of Louis being mobbed up per se, but he certainly rubbed shoulders with those guys here in New Orleans, and I'm sure out in Vegas. And I believe there is a picture of somebody, either Cleveland or Detroit, Louis and one of the guys from there. But a little gee whiz note about Louis: he was married several times, but his first wife was a descendant of one of the guys that was lynched in the Orleans Parish Prison. A descendant of Polizzi, Emmanuel Polizzi. But so we got Louis' tomb here. Now we had this is the cause of a lot of mix-up with Diamond Jim Moran. We have the Moran tomb, but this is his son Jimmy. Now, for whatever reason, he listed his parents on there, but they're not interred here. They never were. So a lot of people think that this is the tomb of Diamond Jim, but it's not. And we'll get to that in a few minutes, to where he actually is buried, him and his wife. Now this is a section of Metairie Cemetery that's known as Italian Row, because a lot of Italians interred here, but also mainly because you got these society tombs. And we were just talking about, you know, people would join these societies and chip in, you know, money, and if a member didn't have a place to go when their time came, they would get a vault in these society tombs. Now you can tell some of these were really beautiful at one time, but they've been let go and kind of getting run down. So we'll walk over here. Now this wall of vaults has several people. One of the guys in here is George Provenzano, who died soon after the 1891 lynching, and his stuff is really kind of worn out, so I always have a hard time finding him. I want to say he's up towards the top. But we also, here we go, Provenzano up here. That might be the wrong Provenzano. I don't see George's name listed. But okay, so maybe we'll find it before we go. But we also have, I don't know if you remember me telling the story of the Axeman of New Orleans stuff, and Joseph Monfrey being the best suspect for being the Axeman. And out in California, he was killed by Esther Pipitone. And she told the cops that, you know, he killed my husband, Angelo, but he also killed my husband, Michele Pipitone, in New Orleans. Well, this is the vault of Michele Pipitone right here. It's very worn out, but you can, Michael Pipitone right there. Now, Michael Pipitone his dad was a guy named Pietro Pipitone. Pietro Pipitone did I think about a 10-year bit in jail for killing another guy, Paolo Di Cristina. Now Pietro, this is interred here. I've confirmed he's here. It's not this Peter, but I believe it's this Peter. But this is his vault. So this is his dad. So that's just another thing that fits into the theory that the Axeman killings were mob related, because it's thought that Michele was killed, you know, long overdue revenge for the killing of Di Cristina, which Vito DiGiorgio and Monfrey, they were all associated with. But it's thought the killing of Michele was in return for Pietro's killing of Di Cristina. Okay, this is the Lamanna tomb. Walter Lamanna was a little 8-year-old boy who was kidnapped from in front of his home in 1907 by a bunch of Black Handers. His dad, Peter, he was well-known, well-to-do funeral undertaker in the quarter. And you know, they sent a ransom request, and I believe it was $6,000. Now this is $1907, a good chunk of change. And even though the ransom was paid, they ended up killing little Walter out in the swamp. Basically, as the story goes, the two guys that were watching them, you know, they got scared that they were going to get caught, because I guess they didn't expect the big response from the city. I mean, everybody was out looking for this kid. So I guess they got a little nervous, and they ended up strangling the kid. Now, when they and they hid his body in the swamp, it was a couple of days before everybody got busted, and they got the guys that had killed him, and they took him to the body. But it was summertime. It's out in the swamp. When they found Walter's body, I guess they had broken his neck, and all the most of the flesh had come away from his neck and everything. So his head just basically rolled away when they recovered his body. So the rumor was that they had cut his head off, but that wasn't the case. But a bunch of guys were busted for it, and one female, Leonardo Gebbia, was her brother. I can't remember her name. I want to say it was Christina Gebbia, but I'm not sure. But they were both, out of all of them, those two were sentenced to death, to hang. Her sentence was commuted to life because she was a woman, but Leonardo was the only one to hang out of the whole group. And there was a bunch of people involved in that. And in fact, little side note, there was a guy named Stefano Monfrey who was involved in it. Stefano was the brother to Joseph, who was suspected to be the Axeman of New Orleans. But when they hung Gebbia, he didn't want anybody to watch him hang, so he requested, that they do it in a place where nobody could watch. So they had built a wall around it so nobody could see it. However, where they did it, I guess there was a hill or something, and everybody, including the Lamanna family, sat up there and watched him hang. And supposedly Peter, said something to the effect of, it was a good consolation to see his son's murderer die, even though Gebbia was not the one that killed him. So how they determined to only sentence those two to hang, I don't know. But it's a sad story, even some of the early mob guys were out looking for him. Vincenzo Moretti, he was known to be out there looking for him. Some of the earlier mob guys around town, so it was a sad story. Okay, so here's the tomb of Samsaya. He controlled gambling in New Orleans for Carlos. He was the owner of Felix's, the restaurant in the French Quarter, in 1963. He had a guy named Charles Dutz Moret that worked for him, and Charles Moret was the uncle of Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald works for his uncle Dutz in the summer of '63 before the assassination. So it's kind of hard to think that Carlos wouldn't know who Lee Harvey Oswald was. I mean, this is after Oswald had defected to Russia and came back. I think Carlos would have known somebody like that was in his city.
Yeah, they would have. They'd all been talking about it.
Yeah. And over here is the tomb of, I guess we move down a little bit. This is the tomb of Leoluca Trombitore. I don't have a whole lot of information on this guy. Sometimes you'll see him tagged as an early boss, but I've got no information saying he fits in the succession of bosses anywhere. This is the burial spot of a guy named George Denninger. He and his brother Walter were involved in the 1891 lynching. If you recall, when I talked about there was only a certain amount of guys that were let into the prison to do the killing, none of the names are known for sure of the group of people who went in, but it's highly thought that George was one of them that went in to do the killing in the Orleans Parish Prison. His brother Walter did not. His brother Walter's buried up in Massachusetts for some reason. But George he's thought to be one of the ones that had done the deed in the prison. Okay, here we have the tomb of Frank Clancy, King Clancy. We mentioned him a little bit yesterday. He was the sheriff of Jefferson Parish for many years. When Carlos became boss, he was seen showing up at Marcello's house, the big white one with the red tile, paying his respects. Look at a little story about Clancy is and during the Kefauver hearings in '51. Originally when he appeared before them, he basically took the fifth, didn't answer any questions. Later on, he went up to New York and he answered some questions for the Kefauver guys about gambling and stuff. And I guess that didn't sit too well with people here, but as far as I can tell, nothing really came of it. However, the story goes that in 1955, Frank might have been talking to some people he shouldn't have been. So, in April of '55, Frank goes into the hospital for heart problems. The room right next door to him is occupied by a guy also named Frank Borg. Apparently they're close to each other in age. They're both named Frank and they both looked a lot alike. Well, one morning, Frank Borg ends up with an axe in his head. He's killed in the hospital. A lot of people think that was meant for King Clancy, keep his mouth shut. And it was just mistaken identity that Borg had no connections to anything. He was a bank teller, however, it had the same effect. King Clancy, he kept his mouth shut, and he passed away 5 years later. But all right, behind me is one of Carlos Marcello's old houses. He bought this house shortly before he became boss. He bought it in 1946, the end of 1946. He became boss in May of 1947. From some of the info I've read, the day after he was voted in as boss, you could see a string of cars coming up to the house here. Apparently, people paying their respects and giving him congrats. One of the people seen coming up to his house was Frank Clancy. Frank Clancy was the sheriff of Jefferson Parish, known as King Clancy. And he basically controlled gambling in Jefferson Parish. So he bought this in '46. He sold it in 1958. And this house originally was not in this location. After Carlos sold it, it was moved from down on the corner over here. I've heard stories about when it was moved. It was just kind of an awesome thing to see it being moved. But I guess the corner down here is probably, a few hundred feet or so. So the house was actually moved up here. This house was also, I've been told, was in at least one movie from the '80s about drug kingpins. It was, used as a drug czar's house. So we're heading over to the older section of the cemetery, where the majority of our friends are buried. But you got this little canal over here. This canal separates the new section from the older section. So once you cross over this canal, you're in some pretty old territory.
So this was the old racetrack out here.
Yep. And you see you got the canal over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, this right here is where the racetrack was. Let's see. Got a Confederate Army tomb here. This is a tomb of West Virginia. This was the Confederate president, Jefferson Davis. This was his original burial place. They moved his body, was it into Virginia? I can't remember now, but a few years after his death, they moved his body. But inside, they open the Confederate tombs once a year on Confederate Memorial Day, which is coming up in June. And you can go inside the tombs, and they got the vault where Jefferson Davis was still has his name and his dates on there and everything. But yeah, this is the Army of Northern Virginia. I was thinking West Virginia, but the Army of Northern Virginia.
Well, hey, folks, I'm afraid that's going to be the end of it. We pulled over to park, and Ron had a right rear tire that was almost 3/4 down, I'd say flat, but he could still drive on it. Found a screw in it as we looked at it, and he figured he could get to a gas station and then get on over to somewhere by where he stays and get his guy he knows to repair the tire. And I needed to start north on that motorcycle. So that will be the end of it. The next 2 days I will spend going north on the motorcycle. I'll sweat my butt off. I'll get caught in a traffic jam. I pulled over to the right onto the shoulder on an I-40, and I just go right on by the traffic jam on the motorcycle, and there's some guy that took a cut at me. Can you believe that? He thought I wasn't right, that I could slip around everybody, but I just, made a little dodge maneuver on him and kept on going. And when I was younger, I probably would have taken exception with it. And this day and age, got my ass shot off. But I got home, I don't know, after 2 days of hard riding, and that last 6 hours, the temperature dropped and I froze my butt off. Went up to the mountains in Arkansas. I thought, oh, this would be a fun little side trip. So that took me an extra hour and a half or 2 hours. And that put me way behind, or a couple hours behind. And it turned cold just north of Little Rock. I mean, it was freezing. So anyhow, this has been a fun trip. I look forward to doing more mob trips. You got any suggestions on mob trips you would like to see me take on a motorcycle? I might take a look and entertain it. Thanks a lot, folks.